Hello, this is Heather Hoffman, and I'm here to do a fun watercolor resist background today on my card. I'm using a background stamp called Love in the Background. I'm going to stamp it on Distress watercolor cardstock, and you can see it's a brand new stamp. I haven't even used it yet. I'm using my Misty to line it up and stamp. That's my favorite way, especially for backgrounds. And I'm going to quickly use my powder tool. Again, this will just keep the embossing powder from sticking anywhere other than where I stamp if I had any oils from my hands or anything on there. Now, especially using my Misty and with the texture of the watercolor paper, I like to stamp it several times. This is a nice detailed image, so that allows me to just be really sure that I got a really nice, clean, crisp impression. And I'm just using clear embossing powder on this, now that I can see that I have a clear stamped image, and I'm ready to emboss it. So once I have my embossing powder on there, I'm going to pull my heat gun out really quick, and I'm skipping ahead so you didn't have to watch the whole time of heat setting that. But once it's all nice and shiny and I know that it's all heat set, it's clear so it's hard to see, but I know that it's all done there, so I'm not having loose powder that's going to rub off. Now for this, you can use any watercolors you want. These are my Daniel Smith watercolors. I have lots of other ones that I like to use, and I've just picked some different shades of pinks. They're not even necessarily all the same tone and shade. One's kind of a coral color, one's more of a hot pink raspberry tone, and then one's kind of a deeper, almost like a little bit of a maroon tone to it. And I just put a very light wash over using lots of water. And then I decided to add some splatters, and those got a little too big and dark to begin with, so I dampened those down with a little more water. Pretty much to this technique, once you have the hearts on there for the background, it's really fun to just keep messing with it, keep adding layers. I like to start light and then just layer a little more color on, as I'm doing here. And since it's still a little bit damp, it'll kind of spread out. You can spread it around with a little more water, but that gives you good variation of color and tone. And again, if any of those splatters seem like they're just a little bit too big and too deep, I came back a little and just dripped some water on to kind of thin them down and made sure I hit all the spots. And now I have just kind of a fun, messy watercolor background with the hearts popping through. And I'm going to add a simple heat embossed sentiment to finish it off. I'm using, I love all the sentiment kits. They're so great for when you're using a pretty image or a background and you just want the perfect sentiment. I kind of collect almost all of those. So I pulled off just a simple little handwritten sentiment there. I'm going to also heat emboss, so same thing with my embossing buddy and then my clear embossing ink. I'm doing it on a little bit of black cardstock, and this one I'm going to heat emboss with white embossing powder, so it just pops with that pretty soft watercolor background. I like using sentiments heat embossed in white on black. I just think the contrast is kind of fun and makes it pop a little bit better. Now I'm using my paper trimmer just to trim it into a strip about the width of my sentiment. And once I've got it on there, I just use scissors quickly to trim off the side. I couldn't decide at first if I wanted all the way across the front of the card or a little bit smaller just to fit the sentiment. Now, one thing I love to do with watercolor backgrounds is make them a little smaller than my white card base. If I think ahead and plan, then I kind of stamp in the center of that in watercolor. Otherwise, I just take a little thin strip all the way off of all the edges. That way, you still keep your background image centered and you don't end up with it kind of crooked, because I always look at it. However, if you did mess up and it ended up a little crooked, that's a great time to straighten it up. I just pop my sentiment on there with some foam adhesive to finish it off. Thanks so much for coming by. Have a wonderful day.